So yeah, I think it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get things done quicker. You save time, you save money. You pay for one mediator rather than two solicitors, and you can have it made legally binding at the end. So whilst all the sessions are confidential, if at the end you've come up with a parenting plan and you want it made into a consent order, or you've made a financial agreement, you can have it looked over by your legal team or by our legal partners and make it legally binding. I will say one thing about that, though, is lots of people want to go to family court to be right. Like, I need them to see that they're wrong and I'm right, and that they need to do that, or they think that once they have a court order, everything's solved. The bottom line is you can't control anyone else. And a lot of people actually statistically stick to agreements they've made in mediation rather than by a judge.
Welcome to the Heartbreak to Happiness show with Sara Davison. If you're struggling with a breakup and you feel shocked, angry, betrayed, devastated, or sad and alone, then this podcast is for you. Best-selling author and award-winning host Sara Davison shares how you too can get on with your life to heal, grow, and move from heartbreak to happiness. Here's your host, Sara Davison.
The show. Now today I am super excited to have Rebecca Waclawyj on the show. Now I've chosen Rebecca as my guest because she not only demonstrates a pain to power story of trauma to complete transformation in her own life and being a survivor of domestic abuse. She's overcome many serious issues and challenges in her life with complete bravery. But she's also built a business out of this. So from being homeless, from suffering from binge eating, to be able to set up a mediation company, helping people navigate that really tough part of divorce where you're separating everything, but you need to take that legal advice. She set up a company called Brighter Future Mediation, which she's going to talk to you about, which I'm super excited to hear about. So I am very excited to welcome Rebecca to the show. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you, Sarah. Equally excited to be here and hoping that by finally sharing, it's probably the first time I've actually shared some of this publicly, that hopefully it can kind of support people who might be struggling at the moment to remember they can find a way through. So yeah, excited to be here. Thanks, Sarah.
No, well, welcome. So tell me a little bit and share your story, if you don't mind, about how you got into this, because I know your early start in life was pretty tough, wasn't it? So would you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a kind of farming village in the middle of nowhere, and in quite a high conflict household. My parents then divorced and separated at 11, and I ended up homeless at 16, which was obviously quite terrifying. And that period, although I didn't realize it at the time, actually was the fundaments of thinking about survival. But it also kind of planted seeds of empathy and resilience that kind of underpin my work and why I've chosen to do this work. At that time, it was ironic because at one point I was, studying and helping other people, and then my whole personal life was kind of treacherous and kind of crazy. And at that point, from around the age of 8, actually, I started developing binge eating disorder, which was a real kind of prominent feature of my life. So throughout the chaos of that, work was always my salvation. So I wanted to save the world, as a lot of people do who experience trauma. And so my first postgrad job was working in prisons. Then I moved to probation. But I went on to specialise working with perpetrators of domestic violence. And through that time frame, 11 years, I spent working in family courts and running accredited programs and writing risk and vulnerability assessments. And throughout this time, I really saw the impact that family court has on individuals, family units, and really like the wider community as well. So I trained as a family mediator in 2019, and I thought that's the way to kind of culminate all of my working and lived experience. But I just couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to do the portfolio. I was a single mom. So I just carried on and went into project management. And then last year, I had some kind of significant health issues, one of those pivotal moments. And I just I'm not happy. I was in a hospital bed, not knowing if I was going to make it out, kind of looking over the Thames. And I was like, I need to do something I'm passionate about again. And therefore kind of bringing the project management, the lived experience, and the mediation to develop Brighter Future Mediation. And I guess our main aim is to be accessible, affordable, and wholly online, so that people can, access services when they really need it, and to help people avoid family court. Really, sorry.
I mean, what a story. I'm going to come on and talk about your business that you've created. I think it's quite incredible. But to be homeless at 16, already struggling with binge eating from the age of 8, how did you manage to, at that point, cope? I mean, obviously, being out on the streets at 16, as a anyone is going to be tough, but as a young girl, how did you manage that? And where did you go? Who helped you in those scenarios, and how did you get through that?
Yeah, it was kind of, when I reflect back on it, I don't know. But what I do know is the police tried to put me in a hostel with support from children's services. And I had read a few weeks before in the local paper someone had been stabbed with a needle. I was like, I'm not going there. And they were like, you have to go there, you have to go there. Luckily, one of my aunts let me stay for 2 weeks. And in that time, I went to I just started my A-levels actually at college because I'm one of the youngest in the year. I went off and printed loads of adverts, basically begging for a room, and ended up privately renting. I found out I could claim some minimal housing benefit and £30 a week. I think it was £32 a week. And I actually found this woman who took a chance on me, lived with her. And then 2 years later, I went to uni, first person in my family to go to uni, to leave the area, went to London. And I worked all throughout uni. I used to work in services with children with disabilities to earn money whilst I was studying. I think my bloody mindedness and my tenacity that some people do struggle with at different points in my life is the reason I made it out. I'm not going to say that I've felt like that at every moment of my life, but there's a driving force inside where I can't accept it I cannot accept that it's going to be that way. And I think that's probably what has propelled me. I also think that I have built a village throughout my life of people who accept and love me. They accepted and loved me at 29 stone. I'm now half that, and they still love and accept me through the phases of my life. And I think that's the key, is to, I tell my daughter, she's 11, I say, your tribe is your mind. So you keep people around you who have a similar mindset, and they're your tribe, and that's how it works. And I think that's probably one of the main things. And trying to seek help when you need it, realizing when you need help, and getting help.
Yeah, it's difficult to ask for help though, isn't it? When you're down at that level and like struggling from being homeless and not having support. And I guess in your story, someone took a chance on you, which is amazing, and it just shows the value and that how life changing and pivotal it can be when someone, complete stranger, even reaches out and offers help, which is incredible. And it's great to know that there's people like that out there who will do those things. And obviously for you went and you worked super hard and worked all the way through university, again in a really caring profession, helping children with disabilities, which again is incredible. And then you touched on your weight loss journey there as well. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I know that there will be people listening who, and I know with any breakup, quite often it triggers lots of different things. Either you don't eat at all or you eat a lot, so there will be people very familiar with like the binge eating and struggling with their weight. Tell us a little bit about what happened on your journey there, if you don't mind sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think disordered eating is actually really common. Whether it meets diagnostic criteria is something else, but a lot of us have an emotional relationship to food. And I became obsessed with food at the age of 8, with the conflict at home and being bullied at school because I was fat, at which point actually I was just very tall. I'm like 6 foot now. So I was just very tall. But in the village, you look different, you're different, that's who you are. So I used to come home and hoard food and obsess. And that continued when I was 11. I was 11 stone. I remember I was 16, I was 19 stone. And then it continued until I was 29. So I was diagnosed with depression. I was on medication. I was diagnosed with anxiety. But it was very clear I had a significant eating disorder. You don't get to 29 stone at the age of 29. And lots of different things happened throughout that time. So I had therapy. Some of it made it worse, some of it made it better. So it's really important to get the right help and the right person. So I went through different kind of therapy. I basically, to be honest, the main thing that triggered it for me, I think, is I was told I couldn't have kids. And I just really wanted to be a mum. And that was when I was about 24. And they said, definitely not at your weight and with other things. It's just not realistic. I became pregnant at 29 unexpectedly. And I lost 10 stone throughout my pregnancy because for some reason in my head, my different way of thinking, now I know to be neurodiversity, was I'm only eating for the baby. So I'm just eating what the baby needs. And it was no longer about me. I had my daughter, still had an eating disorder, so gained about 4 stone back. And then one day I just saw my daughter crawling across the floor. She was so muscly and strong, and I felt really proud. And I was like, oh, I wish I'd had that. Like, I wish my mum had had the capacity to do that. And I was like, you know what? I've let it go. And literally within a week, I went to my doctor to come off antidepressants. I left that relationship, which was abusive. And I started training in the gym, and I went on to lose 15 stone in total. And it was never about losing weight though. I've got to say that it wasn't. And I know everyone focuses on that. It really was about me making a choice to be in control of my body and to, see how strong I am. I used to go to the gym just to see, like, oh my God, I'm stronger than that guy, because I am really tall and stuff. So, yeah, it wasn't one single thing, and it rarely is, but never give up on yourself. Never, ever. And I do a little bit, 1% better every day. So you know what? As long as some days 1% better is getting out of bed, and some days 1% better is signing a contract or getting a new job. But do something each day, and then at least you're moving, because, life is a roller coaster, isn't it?
Absolutely. And what a really inspiring message, Rebecca. I think I've heard this a lot on my podcast, actually. It can often be having a baby, having a child, and watching them. And you mentioned watching your daughter crawl across the floor, and then you had that realization. As parents, we'll often do more for our kids than we will for ourselves. And sometimes it sort of lights that spark. And, I was in an abusive relationship, and my son was born, and then obviously that all fell apart. And I was out of it. And even getting up in the morning, as you say, at that point, I was devastated. I was heartbroken. But because I had my son, I used to get out of bed because obviously he needed me. And there was a reason and a purpose, which wasn't what it used to be. But suddenly that was my only purpose in life. And I think it's really fascinating that children can really have such a big impact on us, can't they? When you become a mother, suddenly your whole reality shifts and you have other priorities. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm also really conscious of being a single parent and being a single mom. So I've worked really hard with someone who's very tricky to work with to make sure my daughter has a relationship with her paternal family. But that has come at some cost to myself. And I think learning the boundaries of how much to keep yourself safe, but also make sure you're giving enough to your child, giving them a fair shot, because kids have rights and parents have responsibilities. That's the way it is. And one of their rights is to enjoy their parents if it's safe to do so. So I find it full of moral dilemmas. Is she not having enough male role models around her? Is she, I'm her source of everything. So, I am the chef, the debater, so I feel like it can be quite intense, and I need her to be independent. So it's just a totally different experience. It's definitely not a one-person job. So without my very, very close friends and family, but mainly my friends, because I live far from my family now, still in London, never left. Without them, I definitely know that I wouldn't be here. And, they've been long-standing friendships now, 15, 20, 25 years. And we've all been through different things, been through divorce, separation, cheating, IVF, menopause, all of this stuff going on. But yeah, I think the duty to give everything, but also I don't want my daughter to see a martyr. I also have my own life, and I prioritize my fitness. I prioritize work. Sometimes she has to wait. And I feel like it's made her well-rounded. We'll see. We'll find out in a few years. But for now,
How old is she now?
she's nearly 12, just started secondary, and just astonished me with her resilience. I can't believe that she's just off and gone. So yeah.
I love it. Well, congratulations. I mean, and I think this is really reassuring for a lot of people, it only takes one healthy parent for your child to learn the difference between right and wrong and to be balanced and stable and able to have healthy relationships. I think a lot of us, when we first realize we're in a toxic relationship or we're just coming out of it, feel really guilty that we've had that relationship and that the other parent isn't as healthy as we would have preferred. Should we put it that way? And I think actually the reassurance comes from the fact it doesn't matter if you're healthy, if you've got good morals, good values, if you are an unconditional source of love for your child, and you've learned some tools to enable that relationship as long as it's safe to do so. And I think that's a big area there of grayness as to what is safe. But ultimately, if it is safe for that child to have that relationship, then how do you enable that? And as you say, it does come at a personal cost to us. Absolutely 100%, because you're constantly having to juggle which battles to pick and which battles not to, and what to let go of and what to do. And actually, I'm writing my next book at the moment. I've just finished it actually, and there's the co-parenting and the parallel parenting options that people talk about are just not possible with a toxic ex. And it's I put that on social media the other day, and someone came at me saying, yes, it is. It's a really good idea, and I'm like, in an ideal world, but have you actually tried to do this with a toxic ex? I can tell you, if you can't agree on the little things, then there's no way you're going to agree on the big things. So saying parallel parenting is the other option is crazy in my mind. But anyway, it's one of those things, and it sounds like you've done an amazing job. And I think sometimes you just have to keep going, don't you? If you're a single parent, and those people listening will know, sometimes there's good days, sometimes there's bad days, but ultimately we have to keep going for our kids, and that is our driving force very often. Now, you touched on domestic abuse there. I know you've worked in domestic abuse in the past. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience working in that field?
Yeah, so I began in my 20s working for domestic violence intervention project, which was one of the first violence prevention programs that was accredited in the UK by Respect. And there were different referral sources, but it was anyone who had perpetrated domestic abuse. So we would go through a process with them, sit down with them, do in-depth analysis and assessments. We'd do inventories of their behaviour, and then they would embark on a 6-month intervention program. It was very intense. We also always would have linked partner services, because some people still in relationships, some were separated. And so, it would always be this thing where they would come and they'd present one way, and you'd hear from the partner services, oh, he tried to strangle her yesterday, or he sent her a threat, or, and I think for me, I wanted to work with perpetrators because I believe if you don't solve the source of the risk, they will have 5, 10, 15, 20 relationships. And then that's a lot of people and a lot of families and a lot of kids potentially involved. I learned a lot of things about masculinity, and I learned a lot of things about all of the different structures that support, different levels of abuse. I also just felt that with all that knowledge, I could never end up in that scenario myself. And I know everyone says that, but legitimately, my whole job was working every single day with these men. And then, ironically, I did end up in that scenario. And it's only actually been recently where I've accepted him as one of the people that do that. And it was one of my colleagues where I was explaining something, and she said, why are you surprised? This is typical perpetrator behavior. They're no longer able to control you in this way, so they do this. And I'm like, yeah, but it's just like, there's no buts. It doesn't mean that you're a victim, because that's the thing that I was struggling with. And having seen, people's whole lives turned up, I feel resilient to that. I feel like I've coached myself. I'm okay. But, it is what it is. And there's subtle abuse. Obviously, lots of people talking about coercive control now as well. And, it's closely linked to sexual violence and sexual abuse. So, I think that early intervention is the key, actually, in terms of having healthier relationships generally. And that's why I actually started working with a startup charity called LMK, Let Me Know, who are fantastic trailblazers, writing exceptional programs. It's very simple. It's 10 healthy signs, 10 unhealthy signs. And I worked with them from 2021, from startup, going into schools, delivering these programs, delivering it to staff. And I saw the differences, and I saw the conversations, and teasing out that misogyny. It was already there. They'd have scenarios like, if your partner constantly asks you to change your clothes before you leave, is it abusive? And we'd be on a continuum, we'd have those chats. I really wish that I'd had access to something like that, and to learn about boundaries, that's not being rude, and that's not being abrasive or being too much. Actually, that's, as long as you're able to express it in a way that is conducive, then actually that's your right, isn't it? And then your job is to uphold them. So I learned so much, but what I really also felt was that the child's voice wasn't heard much.
Hey, it's Sara here. Just to remind you that we have 3 online support groups where you can find your tribe and get coaching support from my elite team coaches to help you with any kind of breakup, divorce, separation, toxic relationship breakdown. Get your questions answered and get the boost you need. Also, if you'd like to join our coaching community and turn your pain into your superpower and become a breakup and divorce coach with us, then you can also find the details on my website, saradavison.com. We look forward to seeing you soon.
The child's voice wasn't heard much. And I think that's why I moved towards mediation as well, because first of all, stopping it before it gets to that point. But also there's child inclusive mediation where they actively engage children, and that becomes the agenda for the parental mediation. So it can only be focused on what the kids have said, the children have said. So I think that's what kind of pulled me into that direction, kind of trying to get in there early and, set communication on a better track. Having said that, not all cases are suitable for mediation. So, yeah.
Well, talk about that, because, obviously domestic abuse situations, if you go into your normal mediation process, there's, just to explain, there's the perpetrator and the mediator, usually in a room or on the Zoom session, and ultimately mediation is the mediator's job is to find a compromise, get agreement from the group, from the couple, ex couple. In my mind, with mediation, that can be quite dangerous with an abuser, because it's open to manipulation. They can show up being very charming. They can manipulate. I know I had my own experience of mediation, which was actually very traumatic for me. Even though I'd had a meeting before, as you do in my AMS, with the mediator and explained my situation, they would reassure me that there was going to be no domestic abuse. But because it was so subtle, I guess, and the mediator wasn't trained clearly in spotting the signs of domestic abuse, it all went over his head, and I felt completely abused in that session. Yeah, he had no idea anything had gone on and was completely blindsided when I said that was absolutely unacceptable. Yeah, how can you manage those situations? Can mediation work in domestic abuse situations? Because I'm not convinced, Rebecca.
I'm with you, Sarah, and I share your skepticism. It's really multifaceted what you've said, actually, and they're really important points. And sadly, I think that that's not a unique experience. So listen, mediation is not the perfect profession. We have a long way to go. And one of the reasons I set up Brighter Future Mediation is because when I was training, I just felt like I didn't fit. All the mediators have a certain demographic, let's say, and often are ex-barristers, working part-time, maybe part-retired. And that there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't represent the vast majority of the community. And so I feel like there wasn't a focus on understanding domestic abuse. There was a focus on mediation. And what's happened in recent years, like the Family Mediation Council currently are developing an in-depth toolkit for domestic abuse screening. Frankly, I think that wasn't there before. And so people were left to their own judgments. And if they have limited lived experience, you said it was a man, I'm assuming, probably a background in therapy or law. That's, we need diverse mediators, is what I'm saying. And so our mediators are all diverse with their lived experience and working experience. And my longer term plan for Brighter Future is actually to develop a program to enable people that can remove the barriers for underrepresented groups to actually train, because that was my issue in 2019. I couldn't afford to work for free for 2 days a week. I couldn't. So that's the longer term goal for us. That's number one. Number two, there's a legal obligation from 2014 that anyone making an application to court for children or finances has to attend a MIAM, as you'll know. And the MIAM, for anyone who's not aware, is a mediation, information and assessment meeting. So that's like an hour with a mediator and what they're supposed to do. There's a strict format now. I don't know if that was in place when you were there, including domestic abuse screening. It also digs a bit deeper than just screening. It's more about power and control. It's about a delicate balance of, if there was a history of domestic abuse, what is the situation now? How does the person who survived that, how are they managing now? And how emotionally equipped do they feel to be able to express themselves openly and safely? If that isn't there, mediation can't happen, because mediation only happens when the balance of power is like this. It can't work when it's like that. So that would be unsuitable, and the mediator would say that that's unsuitable. Now, that's for more kind of subtle domestic abuse or historical domestic abuse. If, however, there's a current, or very recent escalation or any kind of abuse or violence, and there's a record of that, then you can be exempt from attending that MIAM in the first place. So any good mediation service, if you called and shared that for us, for example, us, we would help you fill out the form that you need to fill out in order to say to the court, look, I won't be attending, and this is the reason why. So there's 15 exemptions, and that is one of them from attending a MIAM. So it's, the other thing I just wanted to point out that we came across a lot when I used to work with perpetrators is survivors being refused mediation when they really wanted it, because they felt that it had been so long, or the dynamics have shifted so much, that just labeling them as you've been in this situation, so now you can't do this, it forced them into court. It forced them to have to self-represent, or get a Mackenzie friend, or get a solicitor, and it dragged on. Average court case for child arrangements is 43 weeks right now. So that would then impact their life. So our service is holistic. Obviously, I have a long and in-depth experience of domestic abuse, and we have our own toolkit that we use to make sure we assess that. But more work does need to be done, and I think the FMC, they've acknowledged that they're working on it. They had some funding, and it is in progress. But that's why we need diverse mediators as well. We need people that have actually come into contact with people who are homeless, people who have had drug issues or been in prison, and that's really the passion behind the purpose, really, with this business. So yeah, it's not a yes or no. Can it work? Yes, but there needs to be appropriate safeguarding, appropriate screening, and you have to listen to the survivor. That's the key. If at any point you had said in any session, I don't feel good, that should have been the end of the session. It can't continue. Nothing can be gained when it's in that, format. And I'm really sorry that you experienced that. Because when it works, by the way, it works really well.
Yeah, I mean, mediation, I think, is a great tool to keep people out of the family court system, which isn't, in my opinion, fit for purpose for victims of abuse, and can actually re-traumatize them. And the research shows that that is the case for over 80% of survivors. I think one of the challenges with mediation is that even though we put these screenings in place, if you're not an expert in domestic abuse, which you don't have to be if you're a mediator, because you're a mediator, then you're an expert at being a mediator, not necessarily an expert in domestic abuse. You can put screening in place, but if it's just a tick box exercise where it's very hard to spot. We're very good as survivors at covering up anything, and we may not even know we're in an abusive relationship either. We may not have admitted it to ourselves. So again, expecting and putting the onus on the victim to say, I'm a victim of abuse, this isn't okay, and this is, that's way too much. It's just not really viable for as a effective screening mechanism to put the onus on the victim. But I guess it's, again, can that mediator, if they've got experience, spot the flags? Absolutely, it definitely helps if you have, and you've had the training.
I think we stay away from, certainly at Brighter Future, we don't have any labels around it. Unless someone tells us, but I wouldn't say survivor or victim to anybody. But our screening questions are more like, have you ever felt hurt or scared? Has there ever been anything physical that's happened in the relationship? When did that happen? How do you feel about being in a room with that person now? What safeguards do you need in place? And, we also offer shuttle mediation, where you don't have to be in the same room as that person. There's collaborative mediation, where you can attend with your solicitor and they can attend with theirs. And also, mediators are expected to have an ongoing assessment of risk. So just because you had a MIAM and nothing came up, if you're in that room, and what I will say is, working a good mediator, having worked a long time, you pick up on the most subtle, you should, obviously that didn't happen in your experience, but you like, it shifts so delicately in that room that you have to be able to respond immediately. And we certainly have terminated cases mid-session, and the mediator takes responsibility for that because they have their own duty of care. We have our own duty of care to our clients. So we take it really seriously, and I would never expect anyone to kind of have to label themselves, or but we do ask those questions and we explain why, because it won't work, because sometimes there will be
Yeah.
someone where it isn't safe, but they want to, and the mediator has to say no, if I can't manage it safely. So, it's a horrendous situation to be at the mercy of anyone else. When you're a survivor, you don't choose any of that. You're responding to them and family court and a request for mediation and probably children's services and your family. Like, you have all these things you have to deal with that were nothing to do with you. It should be located with the source of the risk, which is a person that does it, the perpetrator. We don't live in a perfect world, but I'm trying to make it better, and I'm certainly committed to having a safer alternative that's affordable and accessible. Because the other thing is, lots of firms, when it became legally required, trained half their barristers basically as mediators as well, so that they could cross-refer. Whereas actually, I think it's quite important to keep it separate from the legal process and have it as that space, the safe space to kind of talk through and see if you can come to an agreement. And over 80% of our cases do. So hopefully we're doing the right thing so far, and we're always open to changing and shifting, and we will keep pushing forwards.
I think what you're doing is really important. I think one of the challenges I've struggled with over the years and years that I've been doing this is you don't want to recommend to clients at all that they get into the family court system. One, because it's incredibly expensive and it's not capped, and with an abuser they throw grenades in and gaslight you. The whole thing, you think, oh, it's going to be X amount, and your lawyer can give you an estimate. But with someone who's hell bent on causing maximum pain and suffering at any financial cost or emotional cost, and that's the other damage. Don't underestimate the emotional drain of going through the family court system,
time,
and on your children as well, and people close to you. It's absolutely devastating, and makes you sort of feel like you're the only sane person in a lunatic asylum most of the time. That's the challenge that clients have. So I've been sort of not wanting people to go to court, but then going to mediation. If you've got someone who is not trained or not, I mean, even training, the training level is hard to train someone on spotting the signs of domestic abuse. We can do it and raise awareness, but obviously they won't be experts like, for example, me and my coaches, because there's a depth of understanding here that, one, comes from being a survivor, and two, comes from years of training and understanding and being immersed in that world. So like you being able to spot the signs, you've got that ability because you've been through it. Whereas, the training doesn't touch the sides on that and can't give you that lived experience. So what I'm really excited about is that you're running this mediation company now, Brighter Future Mediation, which enables people who are, that don't fit that norm. So I suppose that the barristers going in who don't want to be in that, more diverse, will be able to come along and feel accepted and fit in that environment, which is really important, because in those environments you've got to feel comfortable. It's difficult enough as it is, but then also coming through and having someone who can spot the signs of domestic abuse, I think is absolutely critical. And I think if you've got this, like you said, there's no perfect answer with the family court system or any of these systems. So if you can go into mediation, have somebody like you who can spot the signs and you can feel protected, I think that's probably the best way through. And I like the collaborative or the hybrid approach, where you're not in the same room and you've got your own legal team around as well. So we can make it legally binding at the end of that, so that you can't go back afterwards, which again can go through all the time and effort to sort of walk away with mediation, and then the perpetrator says, actually, I'm going to go to court anyway. So I do like that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think people misunderstand or don't necessarily know about mediation, which is why I'm really trying to raise awareness by doing, podcasts like this and talking to people, is those sessions are legally privileged. And what that means is, in mediation sessions, nothing that is discussed can be used outside in family court. That's a real no-no. And it allows you to explore options that a judge just will not explore. They will not explore whether you want to you have them 2 Christmases and they have them a holiday and you go over it. They're not getting into that. They're really not. The court system's overburdened. They're not interested. They really are supposed to be focused on safeguarding. So if we're talking about, situations where there isn't an imminent safeguarding risk, mediation just allows you to explore things that actually work for the family. And that's, I think, the key to the child inclusive bit as well. I've seen that is transformative because you can't argue with that. So you can come in the mediation and you've got your agenda and they've got theirs, and that's the way it is. That's normal. But once the child's voice is in the center of it, the media is not going to deviate from that. So that becomes the focus of improving communication. And also mediation is forward focused. So it is not just about now and tomorrow. It's like reality testing this. How is that going to work when they have a new partner or you have a new partner? What if you want to, christen the child, whatever it is, whatever life stage you're at, it's about what are the goals? Do you want to be at graduation and you're both stood at totally separate ends and you can't say, your kid has to choose it? Or do you want a different way? And if you want a different way, mediators are skilled in bringing that about. And that's the majority of cases, because thankfully, the cases that aren't suitable, hopefully, certainly not with us, will not make it through to mediations, especially if there's risk issues involved in that. So yeah, I think it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get things done quicker. You save time, you save money. You pay for one mediator rather than 2 solicitors, and you can have it made legally binding at the end. So whilst all the sessions are confidential, if at the end you've come up with a parenting plan and you want it made into a consent order, or you've made a financial agreement, you can have it looked over by your legal team or by our legal partners and make it legally binding. I will say one thing about that, though, is lots of people want to go to family court to be right. Like, I need them to see that they're wrong and I'm right, and that they need to do that. Or they think that once they have a court order, everything's solved. The bottom line is you can't control anyone else. And a lot of people actually statistically stick to agreements they've made in mediation rather than by a judge. There's more enforcement of orders where the judge has made the order. And that's because people don't, they think they're going to get that. They get there, the judge says something they don't like. And then what you're going to do, pay £500 to make or £300 to make an application every time you disagree, to go in front of a judge again and they tell them off or they fine them £100. Like, you can't live like that. We have to find a way. And sometimes that way is no way. If it is a risk, there are some people that should not have contact with their children. That's just the way it is. There's no solution to that. But for the vast majority where there needs to be some contact for the child's benefit, we have to figure a way of safeguarding and allowing that process to happen. And that's kind of where we come in, I think.
I think it is music to my ears to hear that there's sort of real in-depth understanding with a mediation firm. Tell us what's next for your company, and if people are listening, how do they get hold of you? Do you work with anyone from anywhere in the UK? Tell us more about who you look after.
Good point, Sarah. So yeah, we cover the whole of the UK. We're fully online and we have mediators around the UK. We provide not only family mediation, we also provide workplace mediation. So, avoiding tribunals and, hopefully before grievances or during grievance processes. Workplace mediation is really, really successful as well. 93% according to CEDR, 93% reach agreement on the day or shortly after. So our goal is to raise awareness of the benefits of mediation and the process, so that people can see whether it's something that is or isn't viable, without having to, go to lots of different places, speak to lots of different people. So number one is raising awareness. Number two is to become the leading provider of mediation in the UK, any kind of conflict resolution, civil, commercial, workplace, family. Our longer term plan, as I mentioned, is to partner with people who are underrepresented. And I would love, my dream would be to get a government contract of people that are currently out of work and interested in mediating, and to be able to provide, a 1-year program where they get accredited at the end, and that, they get to benefit from an inclusive and open service, but at the same time, have the ability to make some money while they're doing it. People can't work for free in this climate. Well, they can, but there's only very rich people can do that. And that's not who we need. We need everyone to be represented. That's a longer term plan. And also, I guess, just to partner with people like yourself, Sarah, people who share our values and our mission around helping people recover from trauma, move past conflict, and thrive. So being able to provide a holistic service. So when someone comes to us, everyone is different and every family is different. So we take the time to say, okay, right now you might not need mediation, you might need a solicitor, but you might need this, or you might need a divorce coach, you might need a therapist, you might need a financial planner. But so that it's like a one-stop shop. They know that when they're being supported, they're going to get that same level rather than having to kind of research and put their finger in the air and just hope that that person's really good. So partnerships is really important as well. And yeah, I think that's the main goal.
Amazing.
For anyone.
So where can people find Brighter?
Yes.
Where can people find Brighter Future Mediation? Where do they go to find you?
So you can find us online at our website, www.brighterfuturemediation.co.uk. So super easy. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok. I know, bear with me because I'm just learning the ropes of TikTok. But yeah, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn, all as Brighter Future Mediation. So whatever your preferred method is, and anyone can give us a call for a free consultation. So that's 0333 240 8038. And that also includes employers, because the other people that are missed, and I know you do a lot of work around this, Sara, is when people are divorcing and separating, the impact it has on their work. And that can be treacherous. Obviously, if that then leads to not working, it's a whole different ballgame. So employers, if you are noticing that someone is struggling with a family issue, it doesn't just have to be children or finances, send them our way, give them our number, they can have a free consultation, it's confidential, and we'll just make sure that they're going in the right direction to get what they need.
So that means if it's not helping them with resolving issues from the workplace, the workplace would refer to you so they could have mediation paid for by the workplace, or how does that tie in?
Well, it's actually both, because obviously if you're having conflict at work, we do workplace mediation, but that's quite well known. So people in HR know that, if there is an issue, they can contact Brighter Future and that workplace can happen. But I think where we miss a trick sometimes is as managers or, day to day coming into contact, you notice something's different. Maybe they're getting divorced, but it hasn't been spoken about. But then you notice the impact it's having. Is one thing you can do is refer to us and let that person have half an hour to kind of speak through where they're at and help us point them in the right direction. Maybe they need mediation, maybe they need therapy, maybe they need a divorce coach. Let's find out what they need instead of just letting it go on and then it becomes a real issue. So yeah, basically turning any conflict into resolution is kind of what we're about, and
I love
hoping to move people forwards.
All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca. You've given us so much useful information, and it's really inspiring to see someone that's gone through so much like you have and be able to achieve so much. Which, well done to you, because I think what you're doing is really inspiring, and I know that it really is going to help so many people out there. I've got one final question for you that I ask all my guests on my podcast, which is called Heartbreak to Happiness, as you know. So, what is happiness for you, Rebecca?
Happiness for me is being content that everything I need is already in me. So not having a kind of, feeling a lack of, just reminding myself, getting back to myself and just remembering at the worst of times. And I tell my daughter this as well, don't rely on everything else. Like what you need is there because, you've made it this far and so have I. So everything we need is in us, even if it's not there that moment, just wait it out. Everything changes. But you're resilient. It's all there.
Yeah, I love that. It's really true. Everything you need is you already have. I think once you sort of have that, because we are survivors, to get through everything is, in your journey from being homeless and having your eating disorder to never being able to get pregnant and now having a gorgeous daughter and you guys, doing super well is amazing. And now setting up this incredible business, Brighter Future Mediation. So I recommend if you are dealing with a tough situation, reach out to Rebecca, give her a call, go on the website, check it out and just see if she can help you, because going to someone who really gets what you're going through can make all the difference. So thank you, Rebecca, for coming on today, for sharing your story and for sharing some really useful information. And thank you for being a fabulous guest.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for listening. Best of luck. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. Make sure to like and follow and subscribe and all the good stuff. And I very much look forward to you joining me on our next episode.
That's it for today's episode of Heartbreak to Happiness. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to win a free ticket to Sara's virtual Heartbreak to Happiness retreat. This is a transformative combination of live webinars with Sara herself, coupled with her empowering online video program designed to help you cope better with your breakup and start feeling happy again. Thank you, and join us again on the next episode for another dose of Heartbreak to Happiness.